with you here. It is
Woof.
Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Get ready, get excited, get loud. It's a big one here. It is Week 16 in the National Football League. I'm Kevin Walsh. That is Donnie Rightside. Joe Lisi, of course. We've already played a few, including two big ones yesterday in the AFC race, Joe.
Yeah, we saw Kansas City just win again, yet again, 13-1 overall. Pat Mahomes looked fine to me. A passing touchdown, rushing touchdown. They win that ball game by 8 points. And then in terms of the second matchup in Baltimore, they laid 7 at home against the Steelers. A lot of people took the Steelers. Well, blowout city. Derrick Henry with 162 rushing yards on the ground. The over comes in late in that matchup, Donnie. And both teams now are tied for the AFC North. And then entering today, in terms of Week 16, we have two critical NFC battles. Yep. We have Washington and Philadelphia, and the battle in Seattle, Minnesota, and the Seahawks.
By the way, you look at those games yesterday for me, it was paint by numbers. I thought both of those teams would win. Both home teams did. But you know what I took away from that? The Kansas City Chiefs now with Marquise Hollywood Brown back in the lineup, made an impact yesterday, adds another weapon. If they can just stay healthy, they're going to be that number one seed. It's going to be so tough to beat them. Then on the flip side, the Pittsburgh Steelers, you saw them against Philadelphia, guys, struggling in the passing game, but that's going to happen when your number one wide receiver is down. I'm not counting out the Pittsburgh Steelers. They'll be fine. They'll win some football games. They'll make it to the playoffs, but expected outcomes for me yesterday. We'll see if that continues today.
You know, I look at the games yesterday, and there's a number of takeaways. But all of a sudden, Pittsburgh's quarterback play is absolutely atrocious. I mean, god-awful. A QBR under 40 for the second consecutive game. It's getting worse as it goes on. Against the best the league has to offer, I guess we're not in Cincinnati anymore for Russell Wilson. Yeah, it was all fun and good throwing for 400 against that defense. But now I'm looking at a quarterback who can't get it done. So, Donnie, I go back to you.
Yeah, bring it.
Is Justin Fields going to get this job back in Pittsburgh?
Yeah, where was he yesterday? Oh, that's right. He's hurt. Scared to death to actually be in a quarterback competition right now. So Justin Fields is not going to get his job. The only thing Justin Fields does well is get in the end of the game, 3rd and 1, put your head down, get 2 yards. If you get hurt, we don't really care because you're the backup quarterback. No. He'll be fine. George Pickens out there. Look at all these. Look at top wide receivers that go down on certain teams. The Kansas City Chiefs. Oh, Mahomes, what a bad season. He's got no weapons at wide receiver. Jalen Hurts to start the season. What do you want him to do? All his wide receivers are down. He's throwing for 100 yards a game. It happens. You get George Pickens back, they'll move the football. They actually played 2 of the elite defenses. Didn't work out in their direction, but I didn't expect them to win the Eagles game. Didn't expect them to win the Baltimore game. They're going to beat the Kansas City Chiefs on Christmas Day while we sit here.
Well, we'll see how that game does play out, in fact, but Kansas City's on a heater right now. I'll just say this about Pittsburgh in terms of progressing and peaking at the right time, right? They're not doing that with Russell Wilson.
Certainly not.
Right? Two games, especially back-to-back road games against above-average defenses and above-average offenses, 2 of the best in the NFC, potentially in AFC, respectively, and they couldn't go toe-to-toe with those teams, and that's maybe a cause of concern in a playoff type of situation or, week number 17, 18, if the offense still doesn't show consistency when George Pickens comes back, then maybe Mike Tomlin does turn to Justin Fields as a spark. You have to do, Donnie, you have to do something. I mean, he made
what
this.
What do you mean you have to do something? Like, their record is 10-5 right now.
Yeah,
they lost to probably
first of all,
two of the
half
best
of that
teams
is from
in the
Justin
NFL.
Fields.
No, like quarter of it against bad football teams. It's apparent. This team is
wait
better. Way better
Mm.
with what they have at quarterback now. It's not even close. It's not even a debate.
The offense was better against the Jets and Giants, who were dead god-awful, right, when Russell Wilson came in, and he feasted on Cincinnati and some of the better, worst defenses in the NFL. And now when he's stepping up, he's not producing.
Stepping up without his weapon.
All right.
Like, let's say George Pickens steps back in the lineup and he throws for, still yesterday, 33 pass attempts, 217, 2 touchdowns and interception. I'll take that every week. Like Justin Fields, that's like a season for Fields. 2 touchdowns and 1 interception.
We'll pause it there. We'll get more into this. Russ also certainly did have a very costly fumble that flipped the game on its head. But again, we can get to that. We'll get more into Kansas City as well. We do have a Sunday slate that, it could use yesterday's games, but the NFL apparently has to play on every single day and can't let college football have its day. And then we pretend it's college football's fault, but we can save that for CFT. I think the best game on your Sunday slate then likely comes from the NFC side of it in Washington, where the Commanders will host the Eagles. And, Donnie, the Eagles have a chance to lock up the division with a road victory here.
No, they do, and this is going to be a massive game. And also, you're talking about the Philadelphia Eagles riding high now, consistent winning streak, beating good football teams, not going on the road. I've always thought this was going to be a really tough game for them. Why? Because, number one, Washington's good. It's a road game in the division, and Washington's given the Philadelphia Eagles some problems over the past couple years. And I also say this, how is this the 1 o'clock game? This is the premier game on Sunday, and it's at 1 o'clock. Oh, there's so many good games at 4 o'clock. No, there's no good games, it looks like, at 4 o'clock that are stepping up to the table. But for me, in this game today, once again, is going to be, is A.J. Brown playing for the Philadelphia Eagles? Oh, yes, he is. Whenever A.J. Brown plays and he's healthy, that team is absolutely dominant. Saquon Barkley back in the end zone. But also, I do think that Washington should be able to move the football a little bit better than the last time, Joe, we saw him against the
Could be a lot of points in Washington at 1 o'clock. We'll see how that game plays out. But to Donnie's point, the first matchup was a Thursday night. They looked to run the football, get into a lower-scoring game against Jalen Hurts. They were able to do that for a half. In the second half, Saquon took over. He scores a touchdown, and then the defense really handcuffed Jaden Daniels. Short throws underneath coverage. I think today is a different outcome in respect to the Washington approach. You know you have a hot team right now that has won 10 straight. They've shut down more explosive offenses like Baltimore, and last week against Pittsburgh with Russell Wilson. I think if you're Washington, you spread Philly wide and then challenge them over the top with the wide receivers. That could open up Brian Robinson in the rushing attack and even the RPO game with Jaden Daniels today.
On the AFC side, though, you do have the three teams that now, with the Denver loss to L.A., are saying, maybe we will. It's possible. Miami, Indianapolis, and Cincinnati all booked as favorites, but all to varying degrees. Cincinnati laying nearly double digits against Cleveland. The Colts are laying just over a field goal to the Tennessee Titans, and the Dolphins, Donnie, are actually now a home dog.
Could be.
I am stunned by this, quite frankly, in their game against the 49ers.
And that's also a product of the environment, which means you are going into a football game, one team trying to make the playoffs or maybe has a chance to win the division. The other team's basically out of it at this point. And also, Jalen Waddle on one side, not going to play today. Tyreek Hill is at the point now. It's like, do I even feel like playing anymore? Should I just get the surgery on my wrist? They lose today. He's certainly going to get that surgery sooner than later and probably not finish out the season. It just looks like a hobbled, injured team coming in where even if you say, like, well, San Francisco, what have they done the past couple weeks? They're still playing for something that absolutely matters at this point in the season. So I agree with that line move from Miami as the favorite now to the San Francisco 49ers, Joe, as the favorite.
I do as well. I think San Francisco is the more physical team, even though they've lost 4 of the last 6 heading into this ball game, Kev. You look at the matchup from Miami last week. Couldn't run the football against C.J. Stroud in that defense. They're going to have to run it today to take the pressure off at the passing attack.
I will have time to get into the game. I feel like I'm in outer space.
Why?
The game is in Miami. The Niners just lost at home in a game. They couldn't move the football. And quite frankly, Waddle being injured and Tyreek being hobbled is nothing compared to one of the most injured teams we've ever seen, I feel like, in this Niners group. Like, I cannot believe that this line flipped and it's because of Miami injuries. What world are we in?
I just think the defense steps up more on San Francisco.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
I just think they're a little more physical.
Guys quit. Like, I don't, like, they're, like, they're whoever you
play today, though.
Yeah, but until they quit at half and go home, Antonio Brown style.
It's a tough game to cap from that respect. What are you going to get? But I still believe, straight up, San Francisco a little more physical on both sides of the football. And Shanahan is still a better coach than McDaniel.
Look, I'm not telling you I think Miami should be laying 7, right? Maybe I still am the last person to care about home field advantage and what it means to a point spread. But the Niners are laying in Miami because Waddle is Jalen Waddle. I mean, what kind of season has Jalen Waddle had? I feel like by the way, Michael Penix makes a debut today, and the sneaky actual best game, Jaguars Raiders.
Ooh.
The race for Shedeur Sanders potentially intensifies. But we talk a little bit more about yesterday. We begin in Kansas City and what we saw from Mahomes versus Stroud. I'm actually not even on a side today.
Yeah.
And I'll get to that. Why are you on Texas?
I gave them a chance. Maybe not me as the overwhelming authority in college football, but entering that game on this set, to you guys, I said there was one elite defense entering the matchup in Austin back to end out October. It's not the Bulldogs like it used to be. It is Texas.
College football today, only on SportsGrid.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in the set than I do for this year. I'm ready. I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all long.
You don't want them to go 13-0 and then lose the first round of the playoffs.
Red.
This is their last shot. They don't really have anywhere else to go yet.
Hot take.
By the time I hit, I guess what, Route 33 up here, that ticket's cashing.
Only on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
I remember one time, I don't know if Kenny will remember this, I said put 100 on, I think I left it on a text, put 100 on this horse that won, and then Kenny called me back later and goes, hey, I never got the text. And I'm like,
no.
Oh, yeah. Remember that, Kenny?
I would never stiff anybody. He texted me as they're loading into the gate, maybe, like, it's too late.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
Live with you right here, Pro Football Today. The Kansas City Chiefs yesterday take down the Houston Texans in a covering effort.
Yeah.
I mean, hanging a banner, right? 27-19. They covered the 3.5-point spread. The total in that game, 42.5, 43.5. Lisa, I know you absolutely love the over in that one. It's interesting, but for Kansas City, it was still technically a one-possession game. Mm-hmm. But this actually feels like maybe their best performance since week 1 against Baltimore. And look, it was at home where they haven't lost all season, and they're one step closer to making sure that as long as they win their home games, they're playing in another Super Bowl.
They had a balanced effort offensively. Now, they fell behind 10-7 early. C.J. Stroud and that offense were able to put some pressure on Kansas City, but Pat Mahomes and the Chiefs answered them. You saw Marquise Brown get involved in terms of the offense. Mahomes, his ankle looked fine. He rushes for the touchdown. You saw DeAndre Hopkins step up. They got a touchdown pass to Xavier Worthy as well. Now, he was hurt in the second half. We've got to see how he fares the rest of the way. But at the end of the day, it was a balanced effort. And again, when the game is on the line, especially in Arrowhead, where Houston's within striking distance, Donnie, all that defense does is get 3 and outs. They force turnovers. They get off the field, and they give Pat Mahomes the football with about 5 or 6 minutes left, and it's signed, sealed, delivered. 8-point win yesterday.
Yeah, you take a look at, good football teams make their own breaks, pun intended on this one. This game was going to be a 1-point game. Tank Dell having an unbelievable game, makes a great touchdown catch on a perfect throw from C.J. Stroud, a little bit of friendly fire. He leaves the game, probably going to be out for who knows how long into the next season, even at this point. But it's just one of those things where you watch every Kansas City game. I don't know, we like to get online and say, hey, the refs are always helping out Kansas City, because that apparently is what happens when you're just watching the big games and you have a rooting interest maybe going against them. But they've broken perfectly this season, with whether it's drop snaps, missed field goals, made field goals, key injury players. Because also, that game was 17-16. 15-minute delay on the field, iced the kicker, and really did. He misses the extra point, and away they go. It's just the Chiefs now, but as Kevin points out, the key ingredient in this whole thing is Kansas City is going to be at home with what looks like to be a healthy Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. Good luck beating them. They'll probably be in the Super Bowl again.
They're going to be, let's see, do they flip the favorites once again to win the conference? Nope. I don't know, man. Like, Buffalo's just in another world. So here's, I'm not getting into the Baltimore-Pittsburgh game yet, but just the Baltimore win gets them another step closer to the 3 seed. If this bracket falls, KC, Buffalo, Baltimore, there's no way anyone other than Kansas City can be favored. It doesn't matter what you think of the Baltimore Ravens.
They're going to knock each other out, right?
Yeah. Kansas City has to play at most one of those teams. So that was, to me, the one thing that I was wondering, and I didn't think it was the case, if the books were saying, you know what would be tough for KC is if they ended up playing a 1-6 round 2 game against Baltimore, where they're only a 2-point favorite, which is, I think, about what that line would be. Again, in the same way every game result has, breaks for Kansas City, it looks like the bracket might break, right, for Kansas City in a similar way.
Yeah.
I think the bigger takeaway then almost ends up on the Houston side. This is now 2 straight years, right? It's going to be a successful season because you're going to win your division, you're going to make the playoffs. But you look around at the end of the season, you go, where is everybody? How are we even here? Like, I actually now feel, Donnie, that the conversation around Houston won't be, man, we thought Stroud was going to have a better year. Maybe I'm off base.
Yeah.
I feel like it's, okay, so by the time they got to the playoffs, the only wide receiver left was Nico Collins, who missed a month because he had a bad hamstring. I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah, it is incredible, and it seems like year to year this always happens. But this is the NFL. If you've watched for the past 10 to 15 years, Houston makes the playoffs. They stack them in the very first game they have because the draw is going to be weak, and we know that maybe they'll survive the game but certainly get knocked out in game number 2. But it is unfair because the top-end spectrum that we were hoping to get for Houston this year, you saw glimpses of it but never got a lot of play. Stephon Diggs coming over, Nico Collins healthy, Tank Dell, a couple of Mechie at wide receiver. It's like, wow, let's just see if C.J. Stroud can even take the next jump after what was almost an MVP performance by a rookie quarterback. We never got to see it. Credit them. They're 9-6. They won that division. They won't do any damage in the playoffs, but what can you ask them to do anymore? It's now going to be Joe Mixon, who's like, we know they can't. We're trying to run the football, 14 carries, 57 yards. He's been pretty quiet. But at the same time, Joe, that wide receiver room that was going to be so electric, and also Schultz at tight end, is now down to a fraction of what we anticipated.
Certainly not the same explosive offense that we saw last year where C.J. Stroud could light it up for 300 at any point in time, right? And that was, with, to Donnie's point, a limited wide receiver core outside of Nico Collins. Right now you add the new dimensions, and they're struggling to find consistency. They've had injuries. Also think, Kev, it's I don't want to say sophomore regression, but they were a young team last year with a rookie head coach. They win the division, they win a playoff game, and then all of a sudden, all that expectation from year number 1 falls on year number 2. And because they're young, you see slight regression in terms of handling that type of pressure. We saw it with Jacksonville when they got the victory the year before, 2 years ago in the wild card game against the Chargers, right? They start last year very fast, 8-3, and then all of a sudden that expectation to win the division and maintain that momentum from the start of the year to the end of the year, they fell off a cliff. So this is actually a positive that they're still solidified as the division leaders and they're going to make the playoffs. How do they handle that once the playoffs start? That remains to be seen.
I will add this little note here. We talk about job openings. Houston's job's fine. I think Bobby Slowick actually, if the chatter I see is now he'll be lucky to keep the Houston job, much less get a head coaching job. Like, that's the way that's transitioning all of a sudden now. And I don't know how many guys factor this in, but if you end up seeing a job come available within this division, specifically Jacksonville, I don't know what's going to play out with Doug Peterson. I do wonder if a top candidate out there says, let me try my hand in the South. Let me see if I can make an indent there. I'll make the comparison point, Donnie. You can go to the South, right, potentially. Yeah. Or you can go coach against Kevin O'Connell, Matt LaFleur, and Dan Campbell, 6 times a season.
Yeah, sometimes money really speaks up in those situations where who's going to offer me the best situation, the best cap space, and the best quarterback. And also, it's the same thing we used to talk about. Well, who's going to want these jobs? They're great jobs in the AFC West. Well, you're going to have to deal with Herbert and or Patrick Mahomes for the next 10 years, and Andy Reid. Good luck with that.
Yeah. What we are going to do, though, is get over to Baltimore's big win, a rout, a dominant win. And what that means now moving forward, we'll break it down with you. It's Pro Football Today. I'm actually not even on a side today.
Yeah.
And I'll get to that. Why are you on Texas?
I gave them a challenge. Maybe not me as the overwhelming authority in college football, but entering that game on this set, to you guys, I said there was one elite defense entering the matchup in Austin back to end out October. It's not the Bulldogs like it used to be. It is Texas.
College football today, only on SportsGrid.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in this set than I do for this year. I'm ready. I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all long, people.
You don't want them to go 13-0 and then lose the first round of the playoffs.
Red.
This is their last shot. They don't really have anywhere else to go yet.
Hot take.
By the time I hit, I guess what, Route 33 up here, that ticket's cashing.
Only on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
I remember one time, I don't know if Kenny will remember this. I said put 100 on, I think I left it on a text. Put 100 on this horse that won, and then Kenny called me back later and goes, hey, I never got the text. And I'm like,
no.
Oh, yeah. Remember that, Kenny?
I would never stiff anybody. When he texted me as they're loading into the gate, maybe, like, it's too late.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
Right here on SportsGrid, taking a look at yesterday's games within the NFL, where we did have projected playoff teams battling it out, and Baltimore clinched their spot within the AFC postseason and avoided Pittsburgh clinching this division. For the Steelers, it is not going to be easy, though they do still actually, at the moment, sit atop the division, and they are only plus 125 to win it. So it is not out of bounds that they could still find a way to the top of the North, Donnie. Mm-hmm. But I think it is very difficult to not take that result, look at what these two teams have left, and think, yeah, Baltimore's probably going to get it done, with Pittsburgh having to play Kansas City and Cincinnati the rest of the way, although both are at home.
No, you're right. And certainly from that game yesterday, you take the momentum and say, well, who cares what happened before with the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Ravens? That game was a very good Ravens look. And the one thing that I do watch that game and say, it's cold weather. Like, the conditions weren't bad, which is, again, they went over the total when they have two good defenses going up against each other. But just remember this blueprint, Baltimore. 23 total attempts for Lamar Jackson, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. On the ground, 38 carries as a team, 220 yards, 5.8 yards per carry against one of the better run defenses in the NFL. This is what makes it so scary, because, Kevin, I know you bring up this point, and rightfully so. A couple weeks ago, like, they're 8-5, they're 9-5. Now they're 10-5, starting to look better, but there's still 5 losses. They're not unbeatable. But whenever, Joe, I see this type of game and go, this is the best of the Baltimore Ravens. If they use this type of, and again, you're not always going to get $162 out of Derrick Henry, but you're going to get stunted once in a while. But the game plan is what works for Baltimore. It was perfect yesterday. Just don't lose that.
And Derrick Henry, 24 carries, 162 yards.
Aaron.
We've seen Derrick Henry have limited carries sometimes in terms of the Baltimore losses. When they're eating, it's when Derrick Henry is ripping off 125, 150 yards per game, because that opens up the play action for Lamar, and then you have everything at your disposal. Look at Zay Flowers yesterday. 5 receptions, 100 yards. You're able to distribute the football. The defense has to worry about Lamar in regards to the edge in terms of the RPO game. So now you're having defenses defend the whole field as opposed to just one section, and that's what Pittsburgh was able to do in the first matchup, right? They grinded it out. It was a lower scoring game. They got Lamar and put Baltimore into long third downs. They dialed up blitzes. They forced throws underneath coverage. That wasn't the case yesterday. Baltimore dictated the tempo from the onset, and I think if they were to play like 10 times, Baltimore would want to play exactly the way they did last night to pull out that victory. Now, can they maintain that in a playoff situation? We'll see, because that's still the weakness of Baltimore. Lamar Jackson, when the game is on the line and he has to throw the football, up until this point, he got to an AFC championship game but couldn't win it.
So I want to take what you guys just said and kind of dive into the way this game actually played out, because the final score is shiny. Mm-hmm. It was a touchdown game. Derrick Henry hit a 44-yard run to put them at the 11-yard line.
Yep.
You know what they did on the next play, Donnie?
Yes.
And he got picked off. Now, what was the saving grace? Good old Russell Wilson. Again.
It's coming.
Baltimore keeps telling me it's going to end the way it always does. With us sitting here going, yeah, I don't know if Lamar can get it done.
Yes.
I don't know if this team can get it done. I don't know if this core can get it done. That's what they're telling me. And until the books give me a number where that is even remotely priced in, I will never consider betting them.
So with that number right now to win the Super Bowl 7-1, would you take 13, 14?
So
is that what you would need to bet them for a Super Bowl price?
For me, especially due to my investment on Philly and perception on Philly, I'm not betting anyone to win the Super Bowl unless Wentz takes over for Mahomes. I would bet Baltimore to win the AFC at like 6-7-1. You know, the type of numbers Minnesota gets booked at. You know, Minnesota gets booked at like 10-1. Right. Minnesota controls their destiny to be the 1 seed. Hold on. Yeah. Minnesota controls their destiny to be the 1 seed. Baltimore is almost a coin flip to win their division.
Right. But the difference is that Baltimore has a 2-time MVP and Minnesota has a journeyman backup that's getting it done. So that's why the perception from the books is Minnesota's not built for the long haul.
But you just look at the Ravens and know what they can be, but betting on them to win a Super Bowl. Then they find themselves in Kansas City, and Spagnuolo just goes, I know the exact blueprint to stop this guy. And Lamar goes 17 of 41, 3 interceptions. They don't run the football, and they lose by 4 points. And we go, why didn't they just run the football? Because why? We see it every year in the playoffs. It's the same rinse and repeat.
Round 1, 3-6. Baltimore lays 6 to the Chargers. The whole desk is going to have bolt heads on. I'll take the points. I'm telling you, what the other Harbaugh is going to shut it down. Winter season. That's the way these things go. We'll bring in the top of the AFC. Buffalo's laying 14 next. I'm actually not even on a side today. Yeah. And I'll get to that. Why are you on Texas?
I gave them a chance. Maybe not me as the overwhelming authority in college football, but entering that game on this set to you guys, I said there was one elite defense entering the matchup in Austin back to end out October. It's not the Bulldogs like it used to be. It is Texas.
College football today, only on SportsGrid.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in the set than I do for this year. I'm ready. I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all long.
You don't want them to go 13-0 and then lose the first round of the playoffs.
Red.
Yeah, this is their last shot. They don't really have anywhere else to go yet.
Hot take.
By the time I hit, I guess what, Route 33 up here, that ticket's cashing.
Only on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the book.
I remember one time, I don't know if Kenny will remember this, I said put 100 on, I think I left it on a text, put 100 on this horse that won, and then Kenny called me back later and goes, hey, I never got the text. And I'm like,
no.
Oh yeah. Remember that, Kenny?
I would never stiff anybody. He texted me as they're loading into the gate, maybe, like it's too late.
The Bostonian versus the book.
Right back here. It is Pro Football Today. It's Kevin Walsh, Donnie Rightside, Joe Lisi. We're talking about the two games from yesterday. It brings us right into Buffalo's game with New England, which we're going to get into those specifics in just a moment. But I want to take the AFC odds for just a moment here, which is Buffalo as a favorite to 2-1, Kansas City plus 230, and then the Ravens are plus 350. My question to you guys is, if you are currently without a wager in the AFC, right?
Yes.
From Houston down, 13-1, 13-1, 13-1, Texans, Chargers, Steelers. You got big ticket items potentially on these wild card teams. I'll go to you first, Donnie. Does anyone actually look worth it to you?
The Steelers at 13-1.
Really?
When they're right and they're healthy, in probably in environments where it'll be colder weather, they have a veteran quarterback, they have a running game, they have defensive guys that can step up and make plays. Do I love it? No. But if the question has to be answered, I'm not going to say, I don't like anybody down there. From the 13-1s, the Texans completely shot. They shouldn't be 13-1. They should be 23-1 at this point. The Chargers 13-1 is interesting. I just don't think they have enough weapons when it's all said and done to get there. Love the coach, love the quarterback, but I don't know if it's like, hey, let's just ride Ladd McConkey all the way to an AFC title at this point. I just think the Steelers, when they're right, Joe, in a day-to-day environment where it's like any given Sunday you can win a football game, I trust them at the 13-1 price way more than Texans, Chargers, Broncos, Bengals, whoever.
Yeah, I agree with Pittsburgh being because they're the most physical, I believe, out of all of that group that were there. And even though the Chargers at one point a couple of weeks ago had the number one scoring defense in the NFL, that was before Baker sliced and diced them for 40+. I still believe in the Steelers. Now, if I had a bet in terms of this market, I don't know if I would bet the Steelers. I probably would just, even though I don't love it, I would take a shot on Stroud. Because we talk about quarterbacks being able to take over a game. They haven't done it to this point. I know, and I said there's been regression, but I would still take a shot in terms of Houston, just because they do have weapons in a playoff situation, hoping that they could kick it up a notch. Because when they're on, Kev, they're better, I believe, than all of these offenses right now, including Denver.
But even with all the injuries, though?
I still would take a shot on Stroud. They have Dalton Schultz. They have Nico. Nico could take a game over at any given moment when he's on, right? He is that type of player where he can take a game over, especially in a playoff environment. And the way they run the football at times with Mixon, right? I would take
Let me ask you a question on that, too, real quick. Are the Texans even a favorite at home in round number one?
Against Pittsburgh, yeah.
They would be?
By like what, 3?
I don't know.
Not by a ton. Look, let's just handle this with Pittsburgh, right? So they enter that stretch of schedule where we go, man, how are they going to beat these playoffs teams? They beat Washington and Baltimore by a combined 3 points. It doesn't mean it doesn't count,
right?
But by a combined 3. Then they played Philly and Baltimore again, and those games were they lost by a combined 31 points. So which one do you think is more real, ultimately, on the Steelers? I mean, the team that snuck out 1-point victories, or the teams that don't even look anywhere near as good, considering they were never supposed to be anywhere near as good.
I leave a lot to be judged. Like, let's just say Pickens does come back against the Chiefs and they beat the Chiefs. Like, everybody at this panel, including myself, like, oh, you know what? Steelers, all right, trending in the right direction at this point. They lose to the Chiefs with Pickens and ugly, and then they head down the stretch and careen off the path. Like, yeah, I'm going to be off, but I want to judge them at their best is what I'm saying.
Maybe I'm unfair.
Right.
They could beat Kansas City with Pickens, and it will not change one thing I think about Pittsburgh. It will just confirm what I think about Kansas City.
I think they get it done with defense more times when they're winning games than they do so much with their offense. And I'm not taking away from Russell Wilson's success. I'm just saying T.J. Watt and that defense can take games over, right? We always know that. They got into the playoffs last year with Mason Rudolph and that defense running the football with Najee Harris. So you can't say they can't do it or strike the upset. What I just will say out of the handful of teams that you just mentioned, Houston down to Denver at 32-1.
Yeah.
If you go position by position offensively, I would rather have Stroud over Wilson. I would rather have Nico over George Pickens. I would rather have Mixon over Najee Harris. And we'll go down the list. I would take Schultz over Freiermuth. So in a playoff setting, right, where we're talking long shots, I would take Stroud in that situation.
So here's how I personally feel right now, right? Because ultimately, we all would assume one of Buffalo, Kansas City, or Baltimore will win this, right? I think if you take their combined odds probability, right, they're about 85. It's about 85% it's going to be one of that trio. So for me, 13-1 on any of that isn't long enough. I would much rather, honestly, take the Cincinnati, Miami, Indianapolis group and say, Well, if I get in, I got a crazy ticket on my hands because it's going to take something absolutely insane for one of the big three not to do it. Ultimately, like Donnie, we could debate Houston versus Pittsburgh. Here's what we wouldn't debate. We don't think either one of them is going to actually win this conference, right? So at 13-1, I don't think that's enough of a long shot. I don't think Miami's going to win the conference, but I'd rather 150-1 on Miami than 13-1 on Houston.
I mean, because, again, Miami's probably not even going to get into the playoffs. But for me, I just, like, if I get into a one-game scenario and you say, how are you going to butt that out 13-1 or higher? I trust the Steelers more than any other team that's 13-1 or higher. Yeah, the Denver Broncos, nice season here. Still rookie quarterback heading into the playoffs. You take a look at the Chargers. A lot for me left to be desired on the talent end of it, particularly on offense, and sometimes that defense has been disappearing as of late. The Cincinnati Bengals, so much fun. In a one-game environment, they would be fun. Then you go, they got to score 45 points to beat anybody in the playoffs. So from me, it's almost like just a path down. Who do I trust the most in a one-game scenario? It's the Steelers for me because I can't trust Miami because I don't think they're getting it.
And you can make the argument the Steelers have the best defense out of that whole group, right? That they could take a game over and they can win it just based off of potentially defense.
Well, no. Okay. Let me take Cincinnati for a second.
Yeah.
So if they get in round one, they play Buffalo, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just... they're going to have to score 40. Yeah, good thing Buffalo keeps giving up 40.
Well, yeah.
Don't tell me Cincinnati can't win that game.
Yeah, I don't know, because I think Buffalo could get stops, if that makes sense, where I don't think
Buffalo would
Cincinnati
be
gets
favored. I'm not, but of course Buffalo would be favored, right? But
I just don't think you can win with that sieve of a defense. I just don't think. Like, you don't just flip the switch and be like, hey, we're giving up 16.8 points per game throughout our playoff run. I just don't see it.
If I told you Buffalo was going to lay 7, right?
Mm-hmm.
Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, and Miami.
Yeah.
Who are you most likely to take the 7 with?
Probably still the Steelers.
Okay.
They laid 11.5 in that game last year. 11.5, 12.
How'd it go? It looked the same way.
That was Rudolph. And again, that's why I think they're limited from an offense. You need to have a team where you need to have a slightly above average defense, right? That's why I lean, Kev, to Houston, because we've seen Houston shut down Josh Allen to 9 of 30 in terms of completions. We've seen them shut down Miami, a high-powered offense. They're more of a bend-but-don't-break unit, right? And they got abused yesterday by just a better team. But again, in a playoff situation, they've shown glimpses where they could go toe-to-toe with the big boys.
Because we're going to get into the AFC wild card deal, right? Here's the other thing I guess I would say on. So let's forget Miami, Indy, forget Denver. Just Cincinnati, right? They're almost 10-point favorites today. I don't think anyone here is projecting them to lose, right?
Yeah. No, but I think they have a tougher game than people think today.
That's fine. What do you think the Cincinnati number is? It's this week 85. Next week when they go in to play Denver. Like realistic. Now, I guess the caveat is if KC beats Pittsburgh, that's going to impact the numbers probably a ton because then they're going to assume Kansas City's not going to play in Week 18 against the Broncos. Right. And maybe that's what's going to be the determining factor there. But all I'm saying is if Cincinnati gets in, like you're talking, they're going to go to like 20-1.
Right. You're right because they have an offense and a quarterback, again, MVP caliber. You have a wide receiver that's potentially just a lightning rod that could, get 200 yards in any given game. What do you do? Nine receptions?
They have the best quarterback in football.
Yeah, you could.
Best wide receiver in football.
Mm-hmm.
You could argue they have the best offense in the league. They're 85-1. Like that's tempting. It is, right? But that's also why there is a look at the gap between them and Miami, right?
Right.
I mean they are almost half the number of Miami. 85-1 is a huge number, so it probably doesn't feel that way as much. But you kind of get the idea that they're like, yeah, Cincinnati is more dangerous. Buffalo's laying 14. Miami's a home dog to the San Francisco 49ers. We'll break those games down next. I'm actually not even on a side today.
Yeah.
And I'll get to that. Why are you on Texas?
I gave them a chance. Maybe not me as deep. overwhelming authority in college football, but entering that game on this set, to you guys, I said there was one elite defense entering the matchup in Austin, back to end out October. It's not the Bulldogs like it used to be. It is Texas.
College football today, only on SportsGrid.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in the set than I do for this year. I'm ready. I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all
You don't want them to go 13-0 and then lose the first round of the playoffs.
Red.
This is their last shot. They don't really have anywhere else to go yet.
Hot take.
By the time I hit, guess what, Route 33 up here, that ticket's cashing.
Only on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
I remember one time, I don't know if Kenny will remember this. I said put 100 on, I think I left it on a text. Put 100 on this horse that won, and then Kenny called me back later and goes, "Hey, I never got the text." And I'm like,
no.
Oh yeah. Remember that, Kenny?
I would never stiff anybody. He texted me as they're loading into the gate, maybe. Like, it's too late.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
All right, we're back with you right here. Let's get into the action. Buffalo is laying a bunch. Understandably, though, they're at home and they are playing the New England Patriots. Also, just to, again, continue with the idea that everybody loves Buffalo. I mean, they're playing at 425 as a 14.5-point favorite. They're like, yeah, no, trust me, everybody wants to watch this. It is 14.5 now. Total in this one, Lisi, 46 and a hook.
Yeah, Buffalo playing as good as anybody right now. They dominate as a 2.5-point underdog against Detroit. You saw Josh Allen put up 362. James Cook breaks out with 105 yards on the ground, 2 touchdowns. They've won 8 of the last 9. Undefeated at home, guys. 6-0 at home. They've won those games by an average margin of victory of 17.3 points per game. You have a beaten-down New England team that's lost 4 straight by 9.3 points per game, back-to-back road games. I'm not suggesting Buffalo loses this game. All I'm going to say is I think it's way too many points, 14.5. I do feel it's an emotional letdown after the Detroit game. Buffalo maybe more methodical, more ball control. I think that plays into what New England wants to do on the road. I'll take the points, Donnie, and the under in terms of the matchup.
Yeah, we're at that point in the season, which always makes it tough to handicap. The Buffalo Bills need to win, but again, style points aren't required in the NFL. They move on and go to 12-3. They don't care how they get it. Move on to 7-0 at home. Hopefully, get a couple home playoff games. But if I am looking from a Patriots side, on the road, freezing cold temperatures. Double-digit dog in this game. And also, it's important to bring out, they're 3-11. They're in the mix of, we could move up and get a possible Travis Hunter to go along with May, who could be the stars of our franchise if everything works out in the future at this point. And again, you can't tell Gerard Mayo, hey, don't win this football game, but sometimes you can just tell on what's happening. Also, taking a look at the last 2 road games here that the New England Patriots have played. 34-15 against Miami, 30-17 against Arizona. Those 2 teams aren't nearly as good as the Buffalo Bills. And the way Josh Allen is playing right now, I wouldn't be surprised if they blow him out. But again, it's 14 points. We're not on this panel saying, hey, Joe, who do you think is just going to win the game? Of course it's going to be the Buffalo Bills. But I just think the way they're playing and also shopping around, 13.5, 14, big differences, particularly when it's cold weather and maybe some wind going around. Hey, look, touchdown late in the game, up 13. Missed field goal. You didn't get your cover.
Are there 13.5 still out there? I see flat 14 right now. I guess you could pay for it if you're interested in that type of thing.
Even actually FanDuel 14.5.
Yeah, that's
So I mean, it's a runaway freight train, Buffalo Bills today. Crazy.
Yeah, it's worth a shot. I mean, we talk about the Giants last week with Baltimore, right? When, catching 16.5. We've seen bigger spreads. Carolina stepped up earlier in the year. catching a big number. Anything's possible. It's just 2 touchdowns in a divisional game. I'll take a shot.
Because I always like to do the, if you don't want to take the 14, like who do you take? Is it just Josh Allen to throw 2 touchdowns, rush one in? Is it Cook to get a touchdown? Because sometimes I try to. It's more palatable to say, let me just take a prop, because if they win by 14-plus points, somebody was eating on the offense.
You got to think it's the rushing attack, because I watched that game. Arizona was one of my best bets from the side last week. James Conner over 100 yards. They abused him at the point of attack. Kyler Murray in the passing attack had to do nothing, and knowing how that offensive line's playing right now, I would say Cook on the ground. It wouldn't shock me if he goes for 100 today against New England.
I'd be interested in Ramadre on the other side.
Okay.
At 48.5. Look, I don't think Buffalo's run defense is as good. New England is going to run the ball almost kind of regardless. And but because of the spread, you're getting a super low number on what is still this team's lead back. I actually think you're getting a really great number on Josh Allen to not throw an interception at -114. I would have thought that would be much lower. Look, trust me, I talk about still, I think at some point, Josh, like in the playoffs, I think he's going to throw picks. I actually think that'll be a thing. But he's only thrown interceptions in 4 games this year. In those 4 games, he threw the ball at least 34 times. He, on average in those games, threw it 37.5 times per game. His attempts prop today is 30.5 because they're not supposed to need to throw the football. The Patriots have only picked off 5 quarterbacks on the year, one of the last 4 that they've played. I know it probably sounds gimmicky, but there's a lot more behind it than you'd think. I don't think Josh Allen is intercepted today. I do think the wrong team is favored in Miami, San Francisco. Now, look, I know that of the 3 of us, right, I'll make a much bigger stink about a team being a 2-point dog instead of a 2-point favorite, when ultimately the game is likely not going to land inside that range of outcomes, right? Team wins by a field goal, but it just, to me, is a bit stunning to see this be the number. Like, ultimately, let's just say home field advantage was worth 1.5 points, right? Well, if you were to flip this game then back to San Francisco, I mean, you're approaching the Niners laying a touchdown. That is preposterous. The Texans last week laid 2.5 to this Miami team at home. Now, Miami was atrocious. I think that's why we're overreacting, and we most recently saw Miami be atrocious. Was Miami any worse than the Niners were in that game against the Rams?
No, they rushed for 3.3 yards per carry in terms of that wet track on that Thursday night. I will say this, you look at the 49ers, they're 2-4 on the road, Kev, right? So they've struggled going away from home, and that's a cause of concern in a warm weather environment. But again, you have 2 teams that are 6-8 overall. One has lost 4 of the last 6. The other has won 4 of the last 6. But again, it's going to come down to, in my opinion, which team is more physical. I'm not betting this game strictly because I don't know what you're going to get, but just looking at it from the statistics and knowing the eye test, I do believe San Francisco on the road can run the football. I know that Miami struggles shutting down the run, and more importantly, they can't run the football in big matchups. They rush for 2.7 yards per carry against Houston.
Sorry, but are you not worried that now we're on RB5?
No.
I mean, Garendo's out of the game. Like it doesn't matter that it's Patrick Taylor.
No, because to me, it's the offensive line, right? As long as the offensive line is opening up holes, you could put a high school running back there. They're going to have somewhat success. Which do you believe in? Do you believe in the offensive defensive lines of San Francisco, or do you buy in to the offensive defensive lines of Miami, especially with the weapons gone? And that's why I would lay it with San Fran.
Yeah, I'm with Joe on this one. I just think a look at pressuring the quarterback. I think the defensive stops would come from the San Francisco 49ers. And we're not lauding them. I mean, they've been, the last 2 road games they played, Buffalo and Green Bay. Now, granted, much different competition, different environments than what you're going to be seeing for the Miami Dolphins. But also something has to be said, again, at the end of the year, the Dolphins got a big punch against the Houston Texans, where it's like, okay, I don't think we're going to make the playoffs now, when San Francisco is still plotting to say, we have a chance to rescue the season. 2 bad teams. We're not saying it's going to be a runaway, but I just lean more towards the San Francisco 49ers than I do the Dolphins, Kevin.
That's interesting. You feel the Niners feel like they have a better chance to make the playoffs than the Dolphins?
Yes.
That's very interesting. We'll do some Sports Millions pick'ems with you guys, including the AFC wildcard picture on the other side.
sharpest football contest show in the land. The Las Vegas Football Contest Show focuses on Circus Sports Million, Circus Survivor, and the Westgate Super Contest, handicapping the games and releasing our contest picks every week of the season. With two former Super Contest winners, Brady Cannon and James Salinas, a former NFL player, Mike Pritchard, and over $1 million in contest prize money won combined, the Las Vegas Football Contest Show will have you prepared this season like none other.
Uncle Stevie can just walk up the aisle like he's at the supermarket. I'll get a starting pitcher here, I'll get a closer here, I'll get a first baseman here, and he'll just keep throwing things in the cart because there is no limit.
Now he's gone, so they got to go get arms to make that team better. Because the bottom line was they were just outclassed by the Dodgers. Let's face it, they got their ass beat.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
I'm actually not even on a side today.
Yeah.
And I'll get to that. Why are you on Texas?
I gave them a challenge. Maybe not me as the overwhelming authority in college football, but entering that game on this set to you guys, I said there was one elite defense entering the matchup in Austin back to end out October. It's not the Bulldogs like it used to be. It is Texas.
College football today, only on SportsGrid.
The two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take.
Ka-ching!
Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results.
What? How do you do this one?
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Live with you right here, it is Pro Football Today, and the AFC wild card race is really intensified today due to the Denver Broncos loss this past Thursday. You now have three teams who feel if they win out, they can get in. Winning out is not an easy thing to do, but we are down to just 3 games remaining. But it means it begins today. You must take care of business today, and it means your superstars need to step up. Let's get to some Sports Millions pick'ems here, where we look at some of the stars and some of the options that you can combine. It begins in Cincinnati, where the Bengals are a big favorite over the Cleveland Browns. The Browns have made the swap to Dorian Thomas and Robson as their quarterback, and while DTR is a fine guy to have on your depth chart, the Browns are absolutely downgrading the position week over week. I understand that Jameis and the interceptions and turnovers can be a lot to sit through, but this is not a positive move for Cleveland. Maybe somewhat why they made it, as getting a better draft pick could be just the thing this team's needed. They've also sent out their pick for a few years to Houston with the Watson deal, so I'm sure they're excited to draft somewhere inside that top 10. It means that Cincinnati should be up and ahead in this game. Maybe in a way, they rarely are. Maybe Burrow doesn't need to throw for 300 yards in order for Cincinnati to actually win a game, which maybe means Jamar Chase doesn't need to have another 100-yard game. That won't stop him, though, from finding the end zone. I'm going Jamar Chase higher than half a receiving touchdown. A jet sweep would do us no favors. Jamar Chase did not score a receiving touchdown for the first time in 5 games last week. If you look, Chase, who was kept out of the end zone in the opening 2 games of the season, he has scored in all but 2 games, never consecutively missing the end zone. So this, to me, a guy with 15 receiving touchdowns, hunting down the league-wide Triple Crown at the receiver position, is one of the best options you can find on Sports Millions Pick'ems. Then you take a look at Indianapolis, who, just like Cincinnati and Miami, are hoping winning out can actually get them into the postseason. While you maybe view the Colts as the worst of that trio, Miami, Cincinnati, Indianapolis, and certainly I think many would agree, the Colts have easily the easiest path. The Colts are going to be at least a field goal favorite in all of their remaining games, including today's against Tennessee at home. Can they trust Anthony Richardson? Probably not. Can they trust Jonathan Taylor? As long as he remembers not to throw the football out of his hands before he crosses the end zone. Jonathan Taylor doing that last week kept him out of the end zone again. He only has 5 rushing touchdowns this season. Jonathan Taylor has been one of the most prolific scorers in this league for quite some time. So I think today, Taylor, who has now not had a rushing touchdown in 6 straight games, is able to bust that against a division rival in the Tennessee Titans. I'm going higher for Jonathan Taylor, half a rushing touchdown. You take 2 superstars on Sports Millions Pick'ems, and you trust them to do what they've been doing for a very long time in what is still short careers. That's Jonathan Taylor, higher than a rushing touchdown against the Tennessee Titans, who have allowed now a number of lead backs to find the end zone in recent games as their defense has slipped off as the season has continued, and higher Jamar Chase, the league's NFL leader in receiving touchdowns with 15 on the year, to have half of a receiving touchdown, higher that number. Chase and Taylor is where we go. 2 absolutely monster games when we talk about the AFC postseason picture. If either is upset, that could be curtains on their hopes to make the postseason. We will see what the crew thinks about those games and a lot more. Don't go anywhere. SportsGrid is live right here on a Sunday morning.
Sharpest football contest show in the land. The Las Vegas Football Contest Show focuses on Circus Sports Million, Circus Survivor, and the Westgate Super Contest, handicapping the games and releasing our contest picks every week of the season. With 2 former Super Contest winners, Brady Cannon and James Salinas, a former NFL player, Mike Pritchard, and over $1 million in contest prize money won combined, the Las Vegas Football Contest Show will have you prepared this season like none other.
Uncle Stevie can just walk up the aisle like he's at the supermarket. I'll get a starting pitcher here, I'll get a closer here, I'll get a first baseman here, and he'll just keep throwing things in the cart because there is no limit.
Now he's gone, so they got to go get arms to make that team better. Because the bottom line was they were just outclassed by the Dodgers. Let's face it, they got their ass beat.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
I'm actually not even on a side today.
Yeah.
And I'll get to that. Why are you on Texas?
I gave them a challenge. Maybe not me as the overwhelming authority in college football, but entering that game on this set to you guys, I said there was one elite defense entering the matchup in Austin back to end out October. It's not the Bulldogs like it used to be. It is Texas.
College football today, only on SportsGrid.
The 2 guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity. I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what?
circumstances provide the results.
What? How do you do this one?
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.